Passage number 2 from test 3, numbers 12 to 22. Transforming the American West through food and hospitality. Just as travelers taking road trips today may need to take a break for food at a rest area along the highway, settlers traversing the American West by train in the mid-1800s often found themselves in need of refreshment. So here we've got a reflexive pronoun, themselves. Is it being used correctly? Well, remember, we use the reflexive when somebody or something is doing something to itself or himself or themselves. And here, the noun that this refers to is the settlers, and the settlers found themselves. Yes, they find themselves. That's a reflexive use. Themselves is also correct because this is plural. So we can get rid of be, which is singular, d, which is singular. Their selves, remember we said, is never correct. So our answer is A. However, food available on rail lines was generally of terrible quality, despite having worked for railroad companies. Fred Harvey, an English-born entrepreneur. Notice here we have no in number 13. We have a fragment in the sentence. So first thing we're going to want to do is fix the fragment, or at least, for this part at least, find the most logical introduction to the sentence. So let's actually read and do 13 through 14 so we can get the whole sentence, combine it first, and kind of do 13 and 14 together, since how we combine these sentences probably is going to relate to in some way this opening. So let's keep reading. Despite having worked for railroad companies, Fred Harvey, an English-born entrepreneur, he decided to open his own restaurant business to serve rail customers. Okay, so this is somebody who, let's see, we want to know which one is the most logical. So despite having worked for railroad companies, doesn't make sense to have that as the intro, given Fred Harvey is opening his own restaurant to serve rail customers. This is almost making it seem like he's doing this despite the fact that he worked for them, as if that's some sort of problem or setback, but it's not clear why this would be an issue, why you would have to say, despite having worked for railroad companies, because the point is, he's doing this for other reasons. It's not anything to do with whether or not he worked for these companies. He had lived in New York and New Orleans, so, I mean, who cares about whether he lived there? To capitalize on the demand for good food, aha. Notice this connects to the previous sentence where it says that food was terrible quality, and it builds into the next part of the sentence to say that because he wanted to capitalize on this demand for good food, he decided to open his own restaurant. So this makes the most logical sense so far. Deleting it isn't the worst, I guess, but we'd like to have that opening in C to show what Harvey's motivations were or what he was trying to do. So we like C. So in 14, we've already established that with this period, we've got a comma splice. Here, what's the structure? We have this opening modifier. Sorry, it's not a comma splice, it's a fragment. Anyway, we've got this modifier, despite having worked for railroad companies, which at least initially referred to Fred Harvey. Eventually, we're going to change it to capitalize on the demand for good food. But either way, that opening modifier talks about Fred Harvey. This is essentially in a positive phrase, which is describing him. So what we should do is put a comma here, and then we can get rid of the he, since we've already established Harvey as the subject. So that's why we're going to end up going with D. The sentence would read, despite having worked for railroad companies, Fred Harvey, an English-born entrepreneur, decided to open his own restaurant. So that would be a perfect way to combine these sentences together. All we need is a comma to connect this opening, the subject, to the rest of the sentence. So we like D. A colon is not appropriate because this is not a complete sentence. A semicolon is not appropriate because this is not a complete sentence, the first part, and we've already said that A, again, is not a complete sentence, the original, so it's a fragment. So the only one that works is choice D. Beginning in the 1870s, he opened dozens of restaurants and rail stations and dining cars. These Harvey houses, which constituted the first restaurant chain in the United States, was unique for its high standards of service and quality. So we've got a problem here for 15. We've got a verb was, and we can look at the choices and see, they're changing was to were, so maybe that's an issue. What is the subject of was here? The subject is Harvey houses, which is plural. So this can't be plural. I mean, it can't be singular. It's got to be plural. So we need this to be were. So A and C are gone. Subject-verb agreement. Next, we've got this pronoun its. Again, its is singular. We need this to be plural. So instead of its, we need their. So that gets rid of D, and that goes with choice B. So this is a combination of subject-verb agreement and pronoun agreement. They both got to be plural. So choice B. Number 16, the menu was modeled after those of fine restaurants, so the food was leagues beyond the sinister fare travelers were accustomed to receiving in transit. So which choice best maintains the tone established in the passage? Well, sinister is just the wrong word. Sinister means like evil, used to describe a person or an action, not food. It's a bit odd, so that's not going to work. Surly doesn't work. Again, surly is used to describe people. It's not used to describe food, so that's not going to work here as well. How about abysmal? Does that make any sense? Well, it does fit the tone. Notice previously they said the food was of terrible quality. I mean, that seems pretty reasonable, so we'll hold that aside. Icky, I guess, is good in terms of meaning. Icky food, icky fare, icky food, but that's not the right tone. That's too informal, right? That's not something you would write in a formal essay, but abysmal works considering they said it's got terrible quality. And yeah, so that seems pretty good. So we're going to go with choice C. The meaning is right and the tone is right. 17. His restaurants were immediately successful, but Harvey was not content to follow conventional business practices. Although women did not traditionally work in restaurants in the 19th century, Harvey decided to try employing women as waitstaff. In 1883, he placed an advertisement seeking educated, well-mannered, articulate young women between the ages of 18 and 30. The writer is considering deleting the previous sentence. Should the writer make this change? Should we delete this? Well, it seems kind of relevant. It says his restaurants were immediately successful, but he didn't follow conventional business practices. And then it talks about how, for example, he hired women, which was not common at the time. So this seems like a very important topic sentence, and deleting it would just kind of randomly throw us into this discussion of how women were involved in the business. That doesn't seem to work. So I think we're going to say yes here. We should, or no, we should not delete this. This information is not irrelevant. It's very relevant. Sure, it doesn't, I guess, in some sense follow directly from the previous paragraph, but that's okay. Not every opening sentence has got to transition very cleanly. This is just a topic sentence for what's going on at this point of the passage in this paragraph. So I think I'm happy with keeping this sentence. So let's see. No, because it provides a logical introduction to the paragraph. Yep, that's topic sentence. No, because it provides a specific example in support of arguments made elsewhere in the passage. Not a specific example, nor is it really talking about anything elsewhere in the passage. It's introducing this. So we're going to go with choice C. Response to the advertisement was overwhelming, even tremendous, and Harvey soon replaced the male servers at his restaurants with women. So we look at the original and we see, wait a minute, the response was overwhelming, even tremendous. This is a bit wordy, and you might say redundant, because overwhelming and tremendous in terms of the response are basically the same thing. Sure, they're different words, but it's the same idea. So for that reason, I think this is going to be too redundant, or it's going to be wordy, too wordy and redundant. So C makes the same issue. D has got the same issue because we both have overwhelming and tremendous. The only one that doesn't, gets rid of the even tremendous, is B. So B is the shortest, the cleanest, the least redundant. So that's our answer. Number 19. Not only were such regulations meant to ensure the efficiency of the business and the safety of the workers, but also helped to raise people's generally low opinion of the restaurant industry. So what's nice is we've got the not only but also here. So we can get rid of C, which doesn't have the but. Question is this parallel? Not only were such regulations meant to ensure the efficiency and the safety of the workers, but also help. Notice we need a subject here. All right, just like we've got regulations as the subject, we need some sort of subject after the but in this case. So B and A both don't have the subjects, but D does, and that maps on to the regulations earlier. So not only were such regulations meant to ensure efficiency and safety, but they, in other words, the regulations, also helped to raise people's blah, blah, blah. So D uses the not only but also word pair, splits it up a little bit by using this intervening they, but that's no problem because we need that they to give us a subject for the verb helped. Otherwise, we'd have essentially a fragment. So the answer to this one is D. Number 20. In return for the server's work, the position paid quite well for the time. $17.50 a month plus tips, meals, room and board, laundry service, and travel expenses. Which choice most logically follows the previous sentence? So we're going to add a sentence here which makes the most sense. The growth of Harvey's business coincided with the expansion of Santa Fe Railway, which served large sections of the American West. Well, I mean, the previous sentence talks about the employee's work conditions. Why would we want to talk about the growth of his business? It doesn't follow directly on this sentence. Harvey would end up opening dozens of restaurants and dining cars, plus 15 hotels over his lucrative career. Again, interesting, but doesn't follow off of the previous sentence. These benefits enabled Harvey girls to save money and build new and exciting lives for themselves in the so-called Wild West. Yeah, it's pretty good. I mean, that's building off of the previous sentence, giving us an idea of, the servers' work conditions and what they could do as a result of that job. So that's pretty good. The compensation was considered excellent at the time, though it may not seem like much money by today's standards. So that doesn't seem relevant. Sure, it's talking about the compensation, which is great, but comparing it to today's standards isn't really relevant. We want to focus on why the Harvey girls worked for him, what they got out of it, and why it was so popular. So even though D is closer than certainly A and B, C is going to be the best option. So we'll go with choice C. Okay, 21. For as long as Harvey houses served rail travelers through the mid-20th century, working there was a steady and lucrative position for women. Living independently and demonstrating an intense work ethic, the Harvey girls became known as a transformative force in the American West. So what's going on here? We've got this opening modifier, living independently and demonstrating an intense work ethic, but then we've got a semicolon. This is not a complete sentence, so we cannot use a semicolon or a colon. All we really need here is a comma, because this is an opening modifier, which we separate from the main sentence with a comma. We don't need end, because again, we can only use comma end if this were a main sentence that we wanted to connect with that comma and that conjunction. So C is gone, A is gone, B is gone. Only choice here is D. And then finally, number 22. The writer is considering revising the underlined portion of the sentence to read this. So let's see. The Harvey girls became known as a transformative force in the American West, inspiring books, documentaries, and even a musical. I mean, it seems reasonable, right? We're getting an idea of, we can look at the next sentence. Advancing the roles of women in the restaurant industry and the American workforce as a whole, the Harvey girls raised the standards for restaurant and blazed a trail in the fast-changing landscape of the Western territories. So yeah, we're getting an idea, more specific, of how they are a transformative force. They were so transformative that they inspired books, documentaries, and a musical. That's how popular and well-known they became. So that seems pretty good. So yes, get rid of the no's. No, because it should be placed earlier in the passage. No way. We haven't even built up to that yet. No, because it contradicts the main claim in the passage. No way. Like if you originally thought no, you got to make sure that the explanations work, because even if you thought no, these explanations just don't fit whatsoever. So you're going to have to go with yes. Yes, because it provides examples of the Harvey girls' influence. That seems good. Yes, because it serves as a transitional point in the paragraph. It's not really transitional. It's towards the end, kind of summing up what they do. So really the best choice here is A.